Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Premier Smith, on an issue that's really, a sensitive one and a big one with a lot of people, and that's immigration. Every level of government is dealing with it. Every citizen's dealing with it. Uh, I guess you kind of unexpectedly brought it into the fore again with an interview you did last January. Perhaps if we could start there, we're just kind of clarifying. You'd spoken of aspiring to have Alberta double its population by 2050, and it got a lot of people pretty worked up. Can you kind of expand on that a little?
Well, my thinking about it was that we're already growing at 200,000 a year based on those numbers. So if you just do the math, by 25 years, it would be 5 million population. And I have often thought that we would have more political clout if we had a higher population than Quebec. But what I'm seeing, and I'm doing a lot of roundtables and town halls across the province, people are worried. People are very nervous about our ability to be able to keep up with that pace of growth. And I think we're beginning to see it. So I'm listening to people. I'm having to recalibrate a little bit on what our aspirations should be. I think what we really need is a sensible immigration policy, similar to what we had under Stephen Harper, where we had a point system for bringing people in. We made sure that newcomers matched the economic needs of our economy. We made sure that we had a level of newcomers coming to our country that matched our ability to keep up with housing. And I think what we're seeing is that, especially in Alberta, we're beginning to feel some of the pressure of that growth. And I think that that's what people are responding to.
Yeah, and I'd crunch the numbers because I admit, as soon as I first heard it, I thought, boy, that's a pretty fast growth. And then I realized, well, actually, with where things went in 2023, if we sustain the current growth we're at, we will double by 2050, whether we aspire to do so or not. So the discussion has to be, I mean, you can't slow immigration. That would be a federal move anyhow, but we really have to better deal with it. I mean, our healthcare is having a really hard time keeping up with our existing population. Housing is really pressuring people. The education system. So I guess through better targeting, we could better adjust to that and have them contribute to the growth that we need. But is that going to be enough? Like the numbers just sound so staggeringly large.
Well, I think I think 2023 may have been an anomaly. I think one of it was that when I got elected, we'd started into the Alberta is Calling campaign, and there was a good reason for doing that. I mean, we'd had 13 quarters of out-migration. We knew that we were going to turn around with an oil and gas and other building boom, and we needed to have workers here. But I think that it was more successful than anybody anticipated it being, in part because we were one of the first provinces to firmly put COVID behind us and the pandemic behind us, so that I think a lot of freedom lovers came to our province knowing that we were taking a bit of a different approach. I think as well that the housing proposition was such a good one. We still have several markets in Alberta that are the cheapest in North America. I think Edmonton and Red Deer in particular. And of course, it coincided with the Ukrainian evacuees as well, 70,000 of whom came to Alberta during that period of time. And the remarkable thing is almost all of them got jobs. We just did a recent assessment of how many are on social supports, and it was only about 1,700. So I think those factors were part of what led to the surge in growth. So part of what we've done is we've really we've scaled back that Alberta's Calling campaign just to target the skilled workers that we need. We're trying to get an additional 2,000 skilled workers to come here so that we can keep up with the building growth of homes, keep up with the major industrial projects that we have in the industrial heartland and in the agri-food processing area and in the forestry sector. So that's part of how we have responded to that. But I do think that the federal government has they've clearly let all of the different streams of immigration get beyond the ability of the Canadian governments and provincial governments to be able to properly support. And you're seeing it. I mean, at the Halifax conference, every single premier was raising the concern about the increase in housing prices, increase in rents, the number of people using food bank, the number of people who are newcomers who are using shelters, the impact on education system, the difficulty finding a family doctor. I think Albertans want to be able to embrace newcomers who are going to participate in our economy, but we have to do so at a rate that allows us to keep up with home construction, as well as keeping up with being able to provide all of those services. And right now, there is just way too much pressure on each of those. We're feeling it in government. I think regular Albertans are feeling it as well. And that's why we need to return to a more sensible kind of immigration policy like we used to have.
So another area, and it's a more sensitive one, but people really need to address it, particularly when we see what's going on in the UK,
Mm.
is people culturally integrating. I mean, some cultures have an easier time adapting. I mean, Ukraine's got a similar climate. It's there's a lot of Ukrainian people who'd settled in Alberta previously, so they could quickly adapt to being here. From some of the countries, and they're countries that need. I mean, they have refugees that are coming. They're fleeing some terrible situations, but they can have a hard time integrating with the existing population, and people fear it might lead to the sorts of clashes and events that we're seeing in Europe right now. What could we do to, I guess, calm people and prevent that sort of cultural clash from happening here over time?
Yeah, I think you've identified another reason for unease. People are looking around the world and they're seeing that these disputes are spilling over into a number of different societies. And I don't think Albertans want to see disputes from other countries spill out into the streets here. And I think we've done a really good job of making sure that people are coming here for the values that we have in Alberta. I mean, we value family and faith and community and free enterprise and philanthropy. And there's so many cultures around the world who are coming here so that they can live here in peace and harmony and have religious freedom and be able to raise their families and have a good job or start a business. And that's what we want to keep on doing. That's why having an economic focus on immigration makes so much sense. It assists with integration, and it assists with making sure that those international disputes don't spill over into Alberta. So we have to be very mindful of the nervousness people have when they look around the world, and make sure that we're doing everything we can. Because if we don't have the ability to provide the supports, the English language learning, that first job, the ability to have wraparound supports to get a person into a community to be able to support them long term, that's when you end up with people feeling disenfranchised. That's when you end up with having some of that anger spill over. And I think we've done a great job of being able to avoid that. And so I'm not as concerned about where we find ourselves now, but I am mindful that this level of continued pressure in Alberta is something that is going to be something we have to address. We don't want for it to spill over into people feeling like there are too many newcomers coming to our province. We want to make sure people will continue, as they always have, to embrace newcomers. But I think that the problem that we've seen is that everybody is feeling the increase in the cost of housing, increase in cost of living, and the fact that we have a federal government who's essentially thrown out the immigration rules of the past, and that is what's creating pressure, not only here but through to Quebec and every other province as well. It was part of the reason it was such a major topic of conversation when the premiers got together at the last round in Halifax.
Well, and some of the issue is just sheer volume. I mean, some fantastic people coming, but you can only accommodate so many at so much of a speed. Quebec has always been outspoken and at least controls as much as they can provincially in immigration, even though at the base of it is a federal thing. Are there more policies we can look forward to from Alberta to try and take more control, at least of our own destiny, as to controlling immigration for ourselves?
Well, let me tell you the way I'm looking at this. So we're about 12% of the population, and yet we ended up with 22% of the newcomers in the 22-23 or 23 calendar year. That gives you an idea of just how much additional pressure it is that we've been bearing. The other thing I would say is that our home builders have been amazing because they've seen the extra pressure, so they've massively wrapped up their construction, and now we're building 56% more houses this year than we did last year, which would allow for us to build about 40,000 homes this year, which they tell me can accommodate about 100,000 people. So that is going flat out. So I hope that gives you some idea of what I've seen our housing capability is, as well as what I'm seeing in the social services area. We know that we're seeing an increased pressure in shelter, on food banks, and we want to make sure that doesn't continue. So part of the approach that I've always taken is that I've watched what Quebec has done. Quebec has the ability to choose about 55% of the newcomers that come to Quebec because they're choosing on the basis of language. I just saw recently that Quebec wants to take over their entire immigration choices. And whereas in Alberta, we only get the ability to choose about 9,500 of the newcomers through our provincial nominee program. It seems to me that having more ability for us to use that program so that we can attach workers to the jobs that are available and make sure that we have the supports of the communities around them, that would make a lot of sense. So I have been advocating for that we should be able to, much more like Quebec, have greater ability to have the selection over those who do come to Alberta, so that we can make sure that they're going to be a good fit, and also be able to seamlessly integrate and be able to have the jobs and the social supports to support them. Then I'll continue advocating for that. But the general issue is that we simply, as a country, cannot bring in 1.2 million people. That is, I believe, through all the different streams, the family stream, the refugee stream, the student stream, the temporary foreign worker stream, and the regular immigration stream that came in 2023. And I think we've just seen, whether it's in Alberta or Quebec or elsewhere, that there just isn't the ability for the provinces to keep up, and there just isn't the ability for the housing market to keep up. Back in Mulrooney's day, I think Mulrooney had 250,000 newcomers. That was his immigration target. It advanced more under Harper. I don't quite know what the numbers are, but going back to something that is based on what is our ability to be able to effectively build houses and support newcomers, that's got to be the number. It can't just be an open borders policy without limit. It's just creating way too much pressure on every province's social programs, and it's also putting a lot of pressure on people being able to aspire to ultimately have a home one day, or ultimately be able to have an affordable rental suite. Those things are all connected, and we have to make sure that we're taking care of Albertans.
Yeah, and then, so before I let you go, I mean, there's some reactionary people who say we shouldn't have any immigration. That's unreasonable. Immigration's a net benefit to us. We do well with immigration, and it's important. But as you said, that the 1.2 million a year is unsustainable as well. Do you have a sort of number you think that maybe unified premiers could be asking the federal government to just tap the brakes on and bring us to that's sustainable?
Well, I guess, is there like a 1% kind of target? If you look at, we have 40 million people in Canada right now. If it was 1%, that would be about 400,000. When I look at whether or not our share would be able to accommodate that, I think we probably could. If you look at our historical growth before we ended up with a major downturn in our economy that lasted for so many years. So maybe that's the right number. I mean, there's probably smarter people than me who can figure that out. But I can just tell you from what I have now observed about trying to provide the services to accommodate folks who came here through 2023. I think we had the ability to do some of that more effectively, because we had so many years of decline, and we had some housing projects that had started up, and so we were able to I think do a pretty good job of being able to match that growth pressure. But now I'm looking at the fact that we've got 22,500 additional students that came into school that we weren't anticipating, and it takes 3 or 4 years to build a school. We probably need to build 30 or more schools a year for the next number of years in order to be able to keep up with that growth. That's the kind of practical reality that I'm talking about. Is that if we're going to be welcoming newcomers, we've got to have a place for them to live and a place for their kids to go to school, and we've got to make sure everybody has a family doctor. So I think that there is a very pragmatic and practical approach that we can take that allows us to continue to keep up with growth, continue to welcome newcomers without creating the kind of tensions that are beginning to emerge because people are beginning to feel disenfranchised.
Great. Well, I appreciate you coming on to clarify that for us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I let you go?
No, thanks so much for the conversation, Corey. I know that you guys do a lot of work on covering these and other issues. I mean, the other thing I might say is one of the things, I was just on a northern tour, and it's very interesting to see the difference between north and south, because north keeps telling me we need more people, but one of the things that they're doing up north is they're trying to grow their own skilled labor. They're offering more trades programs to kids. They're having larger families, and we are also a party that supports families. We're doing what we can to be able to make it easier for families to be able to have kids, for moms and dads to both be able to go back to work, so that they don't have to choose between having kids and working. That's part of the reason why we have the daycare program that we do. And we're going to do both. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that has made Alberta so strong, is that we always have had a much younger population here. And so we've got a higher workforce participation rate. We've got higher wages on average, and that allows for all of us to pay lower taxes. So I kind of like that as part of our model as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming on today, and I hope we get to talk again sometime soon.
You bet. Thanks, Corey.